Professor, I know that at Tufts they have a school of human nutrition.
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 Indeed.
And I just wonder do you find that the scientists there who make a lot of recommendations about what we should eat, do they generally have the industry point of view about GMOs, or do they accept your skepticism?
There's nobody at the nutrition school who is an expert on GMOs. No one. But that doesn't mean they can't express their expertise on an area they don't know anything about. But one of the members of the nutrition school was on the National Academy study, so he has an expertise in certain areas of that study. I have not heard a single person at the nutrition school express any skepticism at all about GMOs. Not a single bit of skepticism. I did a study of the National Academy study because I wanted to find out, of the 20 panel members, did any of them have a conflict of interest? The 20 panel members did the 500-page study. And one of them was my colleague at the nutrition school, who I know, and I've been on committees with him. So here's this 500-page study, and the National Academy of Sciences, the most pristine, the most prestigious scientific organization, said there's absolutely no conflicts of interest in this study. So I did a study with a journalist, and we found that of the 26 of the scientists had funding from biotechnology industry or had patents on genetically modified products. Both of those things are disclosable interests. And if you're writing for a journal, those are the things you have to disclose. So we published this paper, and the National Academy was not very happy. They also did not disclose that they had a major gift from Monsanto in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. They should have disclosed that as well in the paper. But I have to say, of the 6 people we found with conflicts of interest, my colleague was not one of them. But anyway, you have to be aware that politics is pushing this in many directions, and I think conflicts of interest has got to be something you have to look at very carefully. But in a short answer, no, there's nobody at my university who has said anything skeptical about GMOs. Maybe they do in private, but not in public. Yes?
Where are we at legally, statewide and federally, in terms of being forced to label things
Labeling,
being
yeah.
GMO or not?
Well, the labeling initiative has been going on for a long time. I remember being in a room with the CEO of Monsanto. There were 5 public interest people and 5 people from Monsanto, and I spoke to the CEO very close, and I said, "Why are you opposed to labeling?" And he looked at me and said, "Well, we're thinking about it." That was in 1999. And Ralph Nader was there holding court, so he heard it. But the states began to take action. Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Maine, they all passed labeling laws. Vermont was the one that was going online. And Monsanto lobbied Congress to pass a labeling law that would preempt any states from having any labeling laws. So the United States Congress passed a law that said that all GM foods will be labeled sometime in the future. It'll take a few years. It won't be easy to see the label. It might be a barcode. It might be a phone number. It's not clear what the label, it's not just going to be a regular label like this has trans fats. So I'd say that the industry has been very effective in stopping the people, the consumers, from knowing what is in the food, whether they are made with GMOs, whether they have been tested by any regulatory body. And currently, the Congress has a law. Nobody is implementing it right now, and we don't know whether it'll even be effective. So the only way you can know whether there are any GMOs in a product reasonably well is if you buy organic, because the organic standard says no GMOs within, I think, 0.9% or something like that. So it has to be almost 99% no GMOs. But the industry has some ways around it. They are using now a new technique called CRISPR, which is a way to make changes in the genome that's slightly different. And what they want to do is they want to get that technique to be excused from being called a GMO. So we'll see how that goes. But there is a technique that they've introduced to try to avoid the category of GMO. We'll see. Stay tuned. Somebody way in the back. I hope I can hear you. Get the microphone.
Thank you. Thank you for divulging this information that's so valuable and vital. I have a question that I'd like clarification on. Is the distinction between, it's my understanding that organic is not the same as non-GMO, and I think that needs some clarification. Could you elaborate?
Well, organic is defined by how the food is produced in the agricultural field, that you cannot use synthetic pesticides, that you cannot use the residue from certain kinds of incinerators on the food, that you can't irradiate the food. That's the standard for what is organic. Non-GMO, and it cannot be genetically modified. That's all part of the standard. A non-GMO can be not organic. That is, somebody can be growing something with seeds that are traditional seeds, that are not Monsanto seeds, that are not genetically modified seeds, but they may use synthetic pesticides. So the two are quite different, and you could have non-GMOs that are not organic, as well as GMOs that are organic. So they're different sectors.
Right. I agree with you, and I understand what you're saying, but what I find is very confusing is if you go for the non-GMO project, which I think is the little butterfly emblem that appears on many items in the store, is that correct? Right?
Non-GMO,
Non-GMO,
okay.
the non-GMO project
Yep.
leads people to a false sense of security. That's my interpretation. Because people seeing the butterfly non-GMO automatically assess that no pesticides were used in the raising of that agricultural
And that's
commodity.
false. You're right, that's false. The fact that it's non-GMO says nothing about whether they use synthetic organic pesticides. GMO is a molecular process in the breeding of the crop, whereas organic is the way it's grown on the land. So they're very different systems. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, I just wanted you to clarify.
But I hear what you're saying. You're saying that people assume a higher degree of safety because it says non-GMO, and that's false.
I grow things organically, and I teach people how to grow organic food.
Yep.
And I was snookered into believing that the non-GMO project was actually the equivalent of organic on some level. And to my amazement, I said, oh my gosh, look at this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, in many cases, the GMO is inextricably tied to a synthetic herbicide that is ready Roundup. So in some cases where it's herbicide resistant, you know you are getting synthetic pesticides. You can be absolutely sure you're getting synthetic pesticides because the seed and the pesticides are tied together. Yes? You have a mic?
Is it true that organic beans and lentils can still be sprayed with glyphosate as a desiccant after harvest? Because I just heard something to that recently, and I was quite shocked.
I just don't know enough about the organic standard but if it's sprayed after the harvest, I would assume some of that residue would be in the soil, and organic standard says that you're not supposed to have residue in the soil for 3 years of synthetic pesticides. So I've never heard that. I'd be surprised if maybe somebody is loosening up on the organic standard. You know, that can happen in Washington because it is a federal standard.
Right.
But you try to find something out more about that and see if that's in fact the case, and email me.
Yeah.
I'd love to know about
Okay,
that.
I'm definitely
It
gonna
just
look into it.
doesn't sound right.
Okay, thank you.
Trader Joe's said 2 years ago that everything that they sold would be organic. And then I noticed that there wasn't organic written on everything. And then they said, well, if it says non-GMO, it's safe. But I noticed that there wasn't organic on all of the non-GMO. And then I noticed that they're putting their label on everything. Now that they have a lot of customers, they're putting their label and replacing their label of Trader Joe's instead of the other labels. And people buy those foods. And there's nothing about non-GMO, but there are some things labeled organic. And when I asked about that, they said, well, yes, you have to go. If it says organic, it's organic. But we can't say anything about the rest of it. And I wondered, are there any laws in the pipeline to get clarity on that?
Maybe somebody else knows how you get information from supermarkets about what they're doing.
From their managers, their store managers. They're owned by a German company.
I wouldn't trust their managers. I mean, there must be somebody higher up who makes decisions, of somebody who knows. I honestly can't say. I just don't know what kind of practice they have, but you're right for being skeptical, because it seems like they're twisting and turning around on some of these terms. And just because people think non-GMO means everything else is safe, they're going to just, advertise it that way because they think people will be happy. People will be happy. So just keep asking questions.
Hi, my name is Rita Batija. I'm functional medicine practitioner. And I just came a few minutes ago, but when she asked the question about the Trader Joe, they never said that every item is organic. I had called them several times, and they do have a registered dietitian in their headquarters in California. And the way they do that, they approach like people, you and I, and then they do tell them to put, their own labels, which is Trader Joe's, but every item, the ingredients are mentioned. So this is how we identify whether the item is organic, not organic. Example, they have one item called Power of 7. Every item on that is organic.
I see.
This is how it works.
You should advise them that, how sometimes they have these
Thank you.
devices that you put the barcode under and it tells you the price. Tell them, put the barcode under it and tell them exactly whether it's organic and whether it's a GMO, and if they can, to give the origin of that choice. So this way that you know it's written down and they have it on their case. And if anybody questions it, if somebody tested it and said, hey, this is not organic, we've got high degrees of pesticides in this, then they can be sued.
Oh, excuse me. Over here. Yeah, in the middle, right here. Hi.
Oh, back there.
Hi.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. My name is Charles McCoy, and I'd like to address the issue that the two young ladies had mentioned about organics at Trader Joe's. I worked at Trader Joe's for 5 years.
Hey, good.
And, so I'm able to at least address those
Yeah.
issues. And the truth in labeling is what you're talking about there. And the fact is that at Trader Joe's, they do have available different booklets that if you do ask for kosher, they give you a whole list of the kosher, a whole booklet on all the organic items, things that are sugar-free and things like that. What they should do, though, is they should make that knowledgeable to everybody. See, that's what goes on with you talking about there, that knowledge factor. But I'm here to tell you that they do make that available, and what you do is when you go there, you can ask one of the managers or any one of the crew members. I was a crew member there for 5 years, and they'll be more than glad, like I have done, to get you that little booklet, and they'll give it to you as many times as you want.
So if they
That's
have a
number one.
bunch of carrots or something like that, the booklet will also refer to the carrots?
Yes, it would identify.
It's not just
But-
packaged food.
Well, I'm going to say that part to you now. But most of it is on the packaged goods. But they
Oh.
do have some things in the booklet that will tell you about the fresh produce.
About fresh food.
And speaking about fresh produce, I just want to switch a little bit here. I'd like to put to you, Mr. Krimsky, about bananas. What do you think about bananas when they state that they're organic, but it's known that the organic versus the conventional, they all go through the same path of being sprayed to come into the States. And this is just like a thing that they always do. So that would make a banana, no banana should be labeled as being organic because of the residue from the spraying process. What do you think about that, sir?
You mean the spraying process
For-
in the field or when they bring it to the country?
When they bring it to the country, sir.
So tell me, with your knowledge, why do they spray it on the boat, let's say, or in
That's
the,
where they do it. They do it on the boat.
And
at
what
different
does the
processing facilities.
spraying do for it on the boat? What does it do? Does it ripen it?
Well, it's not supposed to ripen. Well, let me speak a little bit about ripening.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand this, but when you buy organic bananas, it always have plastic around the tip of it,
Yep.
at the end of it, which is, and you could actually do that with any bananas, even the conventional, and what it does, it slows up the process of it ripening. That's number one.
Yeah.
So they should do that to all bananas, not
Okay.
just organic.
Right.
That's number one. And then number two, what happens is, to address the issue that we just were speaking, is that they say they do it so that bugs that is natural to the bananas won't come into the States. So,
I
so
see.
this is how they
The
do it.
U.S. Department of Agriculture doesn't want any bugs from foreign countries contaminating the agriculture in the United States.
Yes.
So they might spray it for the bugs that come in, but we don't know
Right.
how safe those sprays are. But you raise a very good question, and that is, are those sprays incorporated into the guidelines for what's organic? And I don't think they are.
They are not. I would think they
Yeah.
are too.
Same
you know.
thing with tomatoes.
That's
The
correct.
tomatoes are picked green, and then they're sprayed with ethylene to start the ripening process.
correct.
When they get to the place where they finally are transported. But the spraying of ethylene is not part of the organic standard.
And that's absolutely correct.
So, and
Yes.
yeah, we need to know what those sprays are. So thank you for that information. Somebody else have a?
Some vegetables, there's like a sticker on them with a few different numbers, and it'll tell you what those, if it's like GMO.
Say that again, if
There's
you,
some kind of like a little sticker on some bananas.
and yeah,
And
and-
if you maybe Google it, it'll tell you if it's like GMO or if it's organic.
oh, so you think there's a kind of secret code
Yeah, well, there's like a sticker on some,
on some banana, in Trader Joe's or everywhere?
everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah, if there's a certain code, I don't know the, okay.
And
It's-
so what do you do with that code?
Well, I don't know, but if.
Does anybody know what you do with
There are
it?
different codes which say it's organic, or it's GMO, or it's non-GMO.
You mean it says on it, or you have to decode it?
Organic, yes.
If it's 9, it's
It's organic.
organic.
No kidding.
Yeah. If there are other codes where it's GMO or it's.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Who invented this coding system?
I don't know.
I never heard of it. Thank you
Yeah,
for
yeah,
that.
yeah.
The next time I'll look. Any other questions before we have some pizza?
daughter's talking.
Yes, there's a question there, yeah. You got is there a microphone for her? A microphone.
Have any studies been done on the incidence of chronic digestive issues like intestinal failure, gastroparesis, things like that? I mean, as far as from what I'm seeing, we have a lot of children that are unable to digest food. It's becoming a major issue. Have any studies been done to correlate the incidence of those diseases and the when GMOs came out into our society?
No,
Okay, well this,
not a single one.
there should
And
be.
I've read thousands.
Yeah, there should be. That's like, suddenly we have
Yeah.
these strange diseases where children they're bloated, they can't digest.
Yeah.
It's unusual. I mean, we've never
Yeah,
seen things
and,
like this.
you know, most of what they study is in animals because they don't, you see, if they try to do a study in the human population, there's too much admixture. They'd have to go to a population that has no GMOs, comparing it to a population that does and has a control group, and then look at the incidence of that particular problem before the GMOs got on the market in 1996 and compare what the incident rate was. And then after it got on the market, and one country didn't use GMOs, the other country did, that's the way they could do that study. But no, there's not been a study like that. I have another question here in the front.
A lot of the bloating that people are speaking about is apparently connected with celiac and with gluten.
Celiac disease.
And gluten intolerance, which is a lesser thing.
Yeah.
And when the gluten intolerance goes on undetected and people continue to have gluten, they get things like I did, where I ended up with a double mastectomy.
Oh.
It becomes cancerous. The inability of the body to tolerate it comes up with.
See, that's the problem with doing studies on food and its effects on people, because there's such bad food that has emerged in this country. I mean, we were the inventors of junk food, let's face it. And therefore, there's so much bad food that it could be any of these food items that could be affecting people's health. And therefore, you can't just pinpoint and say it's GMOs. And how are you going to sort out which of the possible food items that could be trans fats or other things that are in the food supply? It would be very difficult to sort things out. That's why these animal studies, you can have controlled studies, you can feed the animals only one thing, you know, and then you can see if that thing has an effect on it. Very difficult with the human population.
When we get the most heavily sprayed of all of our crops, pesticides and insecticides, so that might be connected.
Yeah. Don't forget, Long Island was one of the places that sued the federal government for the spraying of organic pesticides over the years, and you had one of the most active breast cancer groups in the country, 1 in 9 here in Long Island, that actually convinced Al, who was the senator from New York, Al Donato, yeah. And he went ahead and got money from the Defense Department to study breast cancer risks. So Long Island has been very active in those kinds of things.
Didn't they modify the wheat in the 70s? Didn't they modify the wheat in the 70s?
They modify the what?
The wheat.
The
Wheat.
wheat in the 70s.
Yeah.
Probably.
That's
I
when I
mean,
thought they started to modify the
Well,
wheat.
yeah, I mean, there was the Green Revolution, and they tried to do all kinds of things to the crops, but I don't know what effect that might have had on celiac disease or anything
Well,
like that.
I think it's the long-term effects of eating that wheat
Yeah.
over time
Yeah,
And even like young kids are
Yeah.
eating it their whole life, so they have all those
Yeah.
problems, you know?
I mean, the kids are suffering with higher rates of diabetes because of the disastrous food that gets into their lunch programs and just their ordinary daily life of junk food. So, yeah,
Can I assume most of the studies that you were talking about, when they tested for GMOs, they weren't including the sprays that are on them? Or they were just testing for the actual,
well, not totally. The French study was actually testing both the GMO and the herbicide glyphosate. So they did separate pools of animals just with the glyphosate or with the GMO without the glyphosate. So they were trying to figure out whether the herbicide glyphosate was a problem. And glyphosate is the most popular herbicide in the United States. And if you go into CVS, you'll see Roundup. That's what it is. It's Roundup. I don't know why they sell it in a store that sells drugs, but glyphosate is Roundup. And the current controversy is that the International Research Group on Cancer in Europe, under the WHO, has declared that the herbicide glyphosate is a probable human carcinogen, and that's caused an enormous stir. The United States has never declared it anything like that. So there's a big conflict between the Europeans and the Americans on this very highly used herbicide, glyphosate, and now there are hundreds of lawsuits, and Monsanto is trying to control the science on this. Okay. One more question. I can't hear you. Got the mic on?
I was just going to comment on a couple of things that other people were asking about. One is that although wheat has been genetically modified through selective breeding, the wheat crops have never been, no GMO wheat has ever been introduced into the food supply.
Yeah.
And that actually is for a very good reason, which is we export a lot of our wheat.
Yes.
And the Chinese and the Europeans, they don't want GMO wheat, and so it looks like we're not going to be getting GMO wheat anytime soon.
Yeah, that's a very good point. If the Europeans still hold on to their skepticism, then the United States might not want to produce it because they can't sell it. You're absolutely right.
And just to mention about the whole question about the code on the food, it's very simple. Conventional produce has a 4-digit code. Organic produce has a 5-digit code starting with the numeral 9. And that's standard across all of the supermarkets. So if it's
So you can distinguish on the code between organic and standard.
correct.
And what about the GMO?
No, that's not coded. Only organic or conventional
Or
is coded.
conventional. Very good. Thank you for that correction, for that clarification. Okay, thank you, audience.